Your neighbor's supposed to be the bloke who keeps an eye on your house while you are out on a long-haul run. But my neighbor, a retired fella named Mick, was a proper living nightmare. He spent every waking hour turning his garden into a scrapyard and making non-stop, head-splitting noise. I would get back to my quiet, semi-detached house in Bedfordshire after a 60-hour week behind the wheel of my Arctic, completely knackered. All I wanted was a quiet cup of tea and a bit of peace. But the moment I stepped out of my cab, I was greeted by the screech of an angle grinder or the relentless thud of a hammer. Mick's front garden looked like a cemetery for dead appliances. He had broken washing machines, half-rotted timber pallets, rusted mountain bikes, and old petrol lawnmowers stacked 3 feet high. Every time he went to a local car boot sale, he'd bring home more junk, dump it on the pile, and start sawing or drilling it at 7 in the morning on a Sunday. It was driving me absolutely mental. I'd sit in my living room, watching the curtains vibrate from his power tools, feeling a hot, tight knot of rage swelling in my chest. I was living in my own home, but Mick's junk and his constant noise were completely controlling my life. The thing is, Mick thought he was a genius. He'd lean over the fence and say, "Got this pressure washer for 5 quid at the boot sale, mate. Just needs a bit of a service." But that 5 quid washer would sit in the rain for 6 months, joining 20 other projects he never finished. He didn't realize that everything you own actually costs you money twice. There is the purchase price, and then there is the ongoing cost of storage, maintenance, and mental energy. Mick's house was so full of clutter that he couldn't even walk through his spare room, and his garden was a complete eyesore. He was paying mortgage on a house just to use it as a storage locker for rubbish he didn't need. And the mental weight of all that clutter was making him anxious, which is why he was constantly outside, sawing and hammering, trying to build things to make himself feel productive. But his stress was leaking over the fence and poisoning my rest days. One Sunday morning, the screech of his circular saw woke me up at 6:30. That was the absolute breaking point. I sat up in bed, my blood boiling, ready to storm over there in my socks and have a massive screaming row on his driveway. I wanted to grab his circular saw and chuck it straight into his pile of scrap metal. But as I was putting my boots on, I stopped. I took a deep breath, looked out the window at the rain, and remembered some wise advice an old driver once gave me. He said, "Anger is like drinking battery acid and expecting the other bloke to fade away." If I went over there screaming, Mick would just get defensive. We'd end up in a bitter, long-running neighborhood feud. The police would get involved, and my home would feel even less peaceful than it did before. I needed to handle this with cold, professional psychology, not blind rage. I realized that Mick's obsession with hoarding junk was actually a deep sign of loneliness and a desire for control. He had retired, his house was silent, and the clutter was his way of keeping his mind busy. He wasn't making noise to annoy me. He was making noise because he was terrified of the quiet. So I took off my angry face, walked across the driveway, and knocked on his door with a completely calm expression. Mick opened it, holding a screwdriver, looking a bit surprised to see me. I didn't shout. I didn't mention the 6:30 wake-up call. I just smiled and said, "All right, Mick, looks like you've got a massive job on your hands. with all this gear. Do you fancy some help clearing it? Mick blinked, completely thrown off guard. He was expecting a row, but I'd offered him a hand instead. I've got my small trailer hitched to the car, I told him. Let's load up all these old washing machines and broken mowers, and we'll take them down to the council tip together. We spent 3 hours loading my trailer and driving back and forth to the tip. As we worked, we talked. He told me how much he missed his old job and how empty the house felt since his wife had passed. Once the garden was clear and we were sitting in his kitchen with a proper cuppa, I set the boundaries. I said, Mick, I work 60 hours a week on the motorway, and my sleep is the only thing keeping me safe out there. If you're going to run the circular saw, do you reckon you could wait until after 9 o'clock? Because we had just spent the morning working together, he nodded instantly. No problem at all, mate. I had no idea I was waking you. Here's the lesson for every single person watching this. Never let someone else's chaos and noise control your internal peace of mind. When you react with immediate anger, you are handing them the keys to your emotions. You are letting them rent space in your head completely free of charge. Address the situation with calm, firm diplomacy. Look past the annoying behavior and try to understand the psychology of the person behind it. You'll solve the problem 10 times faster, and you won't ruin your own day in the process. Because true wealth isn't just about having money, it's about having peace of mind. If this story helped you think about your own difficult neighbors in a different way, drop a like on the video. Subscribe for more honest tales from the tarmac and real psychological advice. And let me know in the comments, what is the craziest thing a neighbor has ever done to drive you mad? Keep your head cool, mates. Protect your peace. And keep the shiny side up. Over and out.